Hi, this is Gavin Haverstick with Haverstick Designs, and this is The Sound Project. So I'm here today with Jake from Churchfront, and I'm just so excited to be able to. First, I just met you today, and it's all because of Sweetwater GearFest, and we're here at GearFest 2023, and I just love being here because there's so many people that are just passionate about what they're doing and about music, technology, and just everybody get together and kind of have some cool ideas come from it. But thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. So Churchfront, tell me a little bit about Churchfront and what you guys do.
Yeah, Churchfront, I started back in 2016, 2017. I've been a worship leader since I was like in high school. And also because of that, I learned real quickly as a worship leader, I had to understand all the basics of audio, visual, video, and lighting gear and system integration. And I kind of had to stumble through learning all those things over the past decade and a half, however long it's been now. I'm 33 now, and I was like 16 when I started playing in the band, leading worship. So when I was, in my early 20s, I had my first real job as a full-time worship leader. I just realized how ill-equipped I was or unequipped I was when it came to all the tech stuff.
Sure. And
because I got a music degree, went to seminary, so I felt confident about leading a band and being a pastor. And then we had all these issues with like audio and especially audio back then. It would have been, if I was still in that job a few years later, it would have been live streaming and all that stuff, which has become really important recently. But I was stumbling through things, and eventually I kind of just learned a lot of things the hard and slow way. I'm pretty good at, if I have a superpower, it's like I'm pretty good at Google and piecing together things and kind of like learning something for the first time. But then I'm better at also simplifying that whole process and turning around and teaching someone else so they can learn it much quicker.
Yeah.
So around that time, about 2015, 2016, I was like, I was in a place where the church I was working at like wasn't really a great fit for me long term. Part of it just because there's unfortunately a lot of unhealthy churches out there that aren't a great fit for anybody. But then but part of the way I was wired, I really felt like it was a calling on my life of like, man, I think I have something a little different than the typical sort of professional ministry career as a worship leader or worship pastor. And that became Churchfront, where I was like, oh, what if I started putting resources online? Majority of them free on YouTube. And I started a YouTube channel called Churchfront, and I think I came up with a name. I thought I was going to be more of like a marketing agency for churches to help them build websites. So instead of like, a website being your online storefront, I was like, oh, Churchfront. But then the name just kind of stuck. It kind of worked. Yeah. Because I started putting on more like worship and production tutorials, and that's what took off. So like I put on, like I wanted to figure out how do I automate lyrics and lights and stuff like that with Ableton Live. And of course I was able to cobble together and piece together steps of that process from other videos out there. But again, I'm like, the problem is there are a lot of like experts out there, but they just can't explain things in simple terms that non-experts can understand.
Sure.
So I feel like I'm good at being in that middle ground where I can understand expert and then translate it to folks who aren't. So I put some videos up, and people started watching them, maybe a couple tens of views and hundreds of views and thousands of views, and then lots of views, right? This was back in 2016. And even today, you put stuff on YouTube, if it's in-depth content that really helps people get from A to B, it's going to perform well.
For sure.
So that was the beginnings of the business. And I was also a freelance videographer from doing a lot of weddings around that same time. Quit my full-time worship job and started building Churchfront. We started making some courses of like, here's my full system of how to do Ableton Live and some other different facets of worship ministry that turned into like a membership site, turned into like more of a coaching program, and then kind of brick by brick over the past 6-7 years, built this little business. There's 5 of us now, and the brunt of what we do is consulting in education. That's kind of like 80% of what we do, where we are working with churches on a kind of individual church basis, very customized. People get full access to our coaching team to help them implement things like, hey, I've never built a live streaming system for my church, or we want to upgrade our audio or whatever. So it's kind of like light integration work. Yeah. A lot of the stuff that people actually can do themselves, it's not necessarily full on, rigging a bunch of new gear, but a lot of times it's like, well, actually, a lot of our clients, they already have all the gear they need. It's just, they just don't know how to use it. Yeah. Because they had an integrator comes and installs great gear, but then there's no like education or training behind it, sure, or strategy. And then, you might as well have very outdated, useless gear at that point, because if you don't use it right, it's not going to sound good. Yeah, and I think a big part of that too is that when that gear gets installed, you might have a certain set of volunteers, and but that there's changeover, and they said there's new people that come in and some people to leave, but you want to just have a consistency of knowledge, and the fact that you're a great resource for that. I'm sure it's helping out. Well, and kind of. Yeah, in one way, because the way we've helped churches, because there's not really any other businesses out there like doing this in the same way we are, and mainly because it's like we're trying to build something that keeps the costs down. Most of the way we help churches is remote, and we almost have become like a virtual tech director for a church that we can like kind of plug into a church's setup. We set up things like remote computer screen sharing, so we can. If someone's trying to figure out how to set up ProPresenter for the first time, we can actually just remote in and help do it with them or do it for them. So it's like they get to access, especially smaller churches that can't hire a full-time tech director at $60,000 a year or whatever. They can hire us for a fraction of that cost, but they can have the expertise of multiple tech directors with lots of years of experience under their belt. So that's kind of the cool service offering we provide. And then of course we built the YouTube channel up. So now that's also a platform, a marketing platform, not only for our own services, but for other brands that we connect with as well. So that's what we do. That's awesome. And we've seen the same thing. We're pretty young in our YouTube channel. We started last January, or not this January, but the January before. And but it's helping a lot of people, and it's a way for people to just get to know us and what we do. And now the majority of our referral sources come from YouTube. Like people found us that way. And it's just, everyone's looking for, if I have a problem with anything, even if it's just at home, like some home repair thing, I go to YouTube. I go check it out. So if you've got an issue at your church and having that as a resource to find, it's amazing. Yeah. So we're still making at least one video a week. Usually it's two. We have like one video that's our kind of normal YouTube video. And then we have a second video that's like an interview, kind of like this, like a podcast format interview. Yeah, so. That's awesome. What do you find as far as you work with a lot of churches? Does acoustics come up a lot? Oh, yeah. It's an issue, I think, in like probably 95% of churches. And it's one that I think it's one of the issues I more recently became, or like the light bulb kind of went off for me, realizing like just how important of an investment it is to have a good acoustics, because then, you don't want to buy a nice Meyer PA or L Acoustic PA and put it in a, concrete box. Like it's not gonna, like, it'll sound better than maybe a cheaper PA, but like it's still, it's only gonna reach a fraction of its potential of what it should sound like. And even at our own church in Colorado, South Fellowship Church, we did a whole new PA system, a Meyer Lena with some treatment in the room, properly treated, and it's just night and day difference. Yeah. We were using kind of some low budget QSC boxes, and people were blown away. Our pastors were blown away, and even normal congregation members, like they couldn't get over the difference. Yeah. They saw that $130,000 price tag for the project, and they're like, "Are you guys sure we need this?" And then afterwards, like, everybody's been so happy about it.
Yeah. It's such a thing when we work with churches, because you've got music that you want to be sound full and enveloping, and a lot of people, that's their favorite part of the worship is they worship through music. But then you have the sermon and everyone speaking, and speech intelligibility in a lot of these spaces are pretty poor. And so like when we go out and do testing, we even do like this subjective listening test with volunteers from the church, and we read a list of words through the sound system, and they have a multiple choice answer sheet, and they just circle what they think I said. And at a recent job in Ohio, this poor lady, she came up to me and said, "I'm hard of hearing. I have hearing aids. Like, can I take part in this or not?" And I was like, "Do you take part in worship? Like, this is as real world as it gets. Like, yes, please." And she ended up getting like 14% correct or something like that. And imagine that'll change the whole direction of a sermon if you're missing all those words. You know, but it's just so important to hear speech clearly and make sure the room is balanced and not overpowering for the music. Like when people walk in the doors, they don't feel overwhelmed or things are too harsh. And because I'm usher at my church, and there's oftentimes people sometimes will come up and say, "Do you have earplugs?" Like and every little bit affects someone's worship experience, and you just want it to make sure the room is not something that is a distraction from what they're really there for.
My favorite thing about having a properly treated room and a tuned PA is how full the sound is without high decibels.
Yes.
Like that's where, when you have no treatment, your PA is not tuned properly, then as a mix engineer, you're like trying to like do all the EQs and compressions and do all the things at the console to like try to make it feel that full, sort of immersive sound. But then it's often just a mess. Even the more you try to do, the worse it gets, basically. And it's nearly impossible to like achieve what you're really wanting to go for. But then once I've gone through that transformation myself, it's just like our processing is simple on the mixing console, and then it's just so balanced throughout the whole room, and you don't have to blow people's eardrums out.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I also think that a well-treated room with a good PA system, that's really helpful for volunteers that maybe don't have the expertise or the history and the time that it takes to get really good at these things.
Yeah.
It just makes their job easier. So you're not having to fight the room and, like you said, like trying to overpower it, but the more you power it, the more the room takes over. And so I think that just having a nice, well-treated room with a good system is going to make their jobs easier, which will make them feel more fulfilled and want to be able to volunteer more. And so it's just a cascading effect on things.
One significant way that made our workflow easier is that before, because the acoustics of the room kind of skewed the mix so much at front of house, like if you just sent that same mix to our online broadcast, it sounded just really weird, right? But now that the PA is tuned and the room is treated, the master mix we're getting at front of house, like it sounds really great. Like it sounds nice and full. You're not missing a bunch of frequencies here or there that you're trying to compensate for. So now we can actually take that master left-right mix, blend in a bus that contains our crowd mics, and then we put those online. Yeah. And it's like we went from actually 2 different mix operators to now just one. Yeah. Who really all they're doing that is a little bit mixing blind is like they can blend in the crowd mics just from front of house, and it's good to go.
That's awesome. We did this one church in South Carolina where the front of house engineers just had a rough time being able to hear what's truly going on in the room because of where the position of the front of house was and just the room acoustics. But we took measurements at the front of house position and then in 10 different locations around the audience. And at front of house, he had a 15 decibel dip at 60 hertz. And every other position had a 10 dB peak at 60 hertz.
Oh, wow.
So there's a 25 dB discrepancy between what they heard, what everybody else heard. So naturally, what he would want to do is boost it 15 decibels or so until it sounded even with everything else. But then everybody else is just getting hit with that kick drum energy and just blowing them away with that. So it's really nice once we were able to balance that room out, everybody gets a better experience. The front of house engineer is going to hear things clearly. Everybody else is going to get a good experience that way too.
Yeah.
So what kind of do you see anything new that you guys are doing over the next year or so? Like you have a new direction you're going with Churchfront?
A lot of what we do, we just keep refining the way we're working with our clients. From being some clients, they work with us through like, hey, I just need the online course and I'll take it and I'll run with it and get results, and that's great. And then others are like, hey, I'm a busy lead pastor of a church, and even though your course is like, show me all the steps, I don't have the time to do it. So we're actually just kind of innovating processes of like, how can we just do it for you and just make that process easier? And thanks to technology, like I said, whether it's Zoom or remote desktop sharing, we were able to like, or modern mixing consoles, like we have pre-built templates so that we can load into someone's console remotely and help them set it up. And our guys on my team, Adam, who's our lead tech coach, just the solutions he comes up with are just incredible. For the way he was literally helping a client dial in their broadcast mix, and he had used the aggregate audio device on Mac to make it so he could basically monitor, where he is in Tennessee, this client who's in Toronto, like to help him do this stuff. And it's fun because we get to, again, like Churchfront, we're a small little shop in operation, and we're not flying. We do on-site visits, but not all of our clients, have the budget for it or want to do that. Yeah. So we're just trying to innovate those processes to be like, how can we be more of your virtual worship and tech assistant, to just really accelerate these things, get it set up right. And then sometimes it's like, we can help you get it set up right, and then we'll turn around and kind of like show you how we did it. And then you can learn from that.
That's awesome. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you? Like, is it a website or social media? Yeah,
just churchfront.com. There's a contact form there. Worshipministryschool.com. That's another website. That's where we have, that's the actual learning platform, coaching platform. But we're easy to get a hold of. So Jake at churchfront.com. That's I'll see that personal email. I'll forward you to the right place. But
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for taking time out. I know GearFest, there's a lot to see and a lot to do, but I'm so glad that we were able to connect and for you to take time to do this.
Thanks, Gavin.
Yeah. That's been another episode of The Sound Project. Really appreciate you being a part of this. If you've got any ideas for future podcasts you'd like us to cover, you can email us at info@haversickdesigns.com or comment below, and we will see you next week.